Whakatakita hau ki te uru, whakatakita hau ki te tonga, ki a mā kina ki uta, ki a mā taratara ki tai, he aki ana te atakura, he teo, he hoka, he hauhu, a ti hei mauri ora. Nei rā te mihi ki a koutou i tēnei wā, ko tai mai nei i tēnei hui, te hui o tātou, mō tō tātou mahi o Waitaha, tēnei te mihi ki a koutou, nā rangatira, nā kaimahi, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou. Welcome, it's great to have everyone here, and welcome to this regional transport meeting, my first one since I took over being the chair of this. So welcome all the mayors, deputy mayors, welcome here to this meeting. And to anyone who's doing the live stream thing and watching online, welcome, and to our staff and to any visitors we've got here, so welcome to the meeting. Yeah, we've got a quorum, I'm pretty sure. Have we got any apologies? I know we've got Mayor Dan Gordon, of course, but Deputy Mayor Neville Atkinson's here. And Councillor Edge, I believe, was going to be online, but okay.
Craig Mackle.
Kia ora. So Mayor Mackle from Kaikoura, yeah. Kia ora. So yeah, if Councillor Edge doesn't show up, he'll be an apologies, but he was going to come online, so all good. Any conflicts of interest? No, all good. We have no, we've had no requests for public forums, deputations, or petitions. I don't believe there's any extraordinary or urgent business. No, all good. And we've received no notices of motion. So our first item of business is 7.1 on page 11 of your agenda, and that's our minutes from the 29th of August. And I also think we have here, if we can do this here, because the only item in public excluded is the minutes of those meetings, so if we can approve them in this resolution as well, when we don't have to go into public excluded. Is everyone happy with that, unless they have something wanted to raise about those minutes in public excluded? All good? Cool. So do I have a mover for these minutes? Yeah, okay, Mayor Black and seconded by Mayor Rowley. Cool. Any discussion needed? No, all those in favour, please say aye. Any against? That's carried. Kia ora. Okay, first report item is 8.1, and that's on page 31 of our agendas. And Sam, you're going to come to the table and introduce us. So kia ora, Sam. Thank you.
Kia ora, thank you, Mr. Chair, and kia ora, committee. The purpose of this report is to seek the committee's endorsement of the priority areas for the Canterbury Regional Transport Work Programme to be progressed over the coming year or so. I'll take the report as largely read, but draw your attention to just a few key points from it. As you'll know, the focus of the Regional Transport Work Programme in recent years has been to undertake the midterm review of the Canterbury Regional Land Transport Plan, which is a statute requirement for this committee under the Land Transport Management Act. This work was completed earlier this calendar year. Since then, Environment Canterbury staff have been working closely with the Canterbury Transport Officers Group and the Regional Road Safety Working Group, which has representatives from all the committee members sitting at the table here, to identify and develop some priority projects and initiatives to be progressed while really work on the RLTP becomes a little less resource intensive over the foreseeable future. Noting, of course, that the work on the RLTP will ramp up again with the full review of the plan required by mid-2027. So we find ourselves with the opportunity for a slight window in that. Projects initiatives considered for inclusion on the work program included actions from previous committee decisions relating to the RLTP, areas identified in the RLTP as particular priorities, and other areas of work officers considered particularly useful. And these useful areas were really focused on areas where there may be an evidence gap, where further information might usefully inform our work on the RLTP going forward, both in terms of content and direction. In your report, you'll find an overview of the proposed work program priorities to be progressed by staff in tables in paragraph 14 and in resolution 3 of the report. And they cover broadly areas of funding, safety, network resilience, freight, and more. Most of the priorities are proposed to be progressed and delivered this financial year, so by middle of 2025. And the purpose of that is, again, really to be in time to inform the work that's upcoming to do the full review of the RLTP. So the work program priorities really are trying to inform the key statutory function of this committee around the RLTP. Environment Canterbury staff are ultimately responsible for delivering this work program on behalf of the committee, and sufficient resourcing and budget has been included in the council's long-term plan to undertake the work. In terms of local council, there's no direct cost implications, but we do work closely with your staff through in-kind staff time to really benefit from their technical advice and support to progress this work. We have, of course, also considered other work being progressed locally at the South Island level and nationally to make sure we're not duplicating resource, all that stuff. So should the committee endorse the work program priorities today, staff will continue to come back to the committee with updates on these pieces of work as we progress them during next calendar year. Mr. Chair, happy to take the rest of the report as read and happy for any questions.
Kia ora, Sam. Have we got any questions from committee members? Yep. Neil?
Just one on page 32. The state highways under time frame November 24, were there now? Oh, James coming up. Right, thank you.
Any other questions? No, it doesn't look like it. You're off the hook, Sam. There you go. So we've got our resolutions in front of us. So there's 1, 2, 3, and that 3 has a big table, of course. Do I have a mover? Are we happy to take them all together? Yep. Do I have a mover? So Mayor Sam and then Mayor Nigel. Seconded. Any discussion required? No? All those in favour, please say aye. Any against? That's carried. Thank you. Next item is on to 8.2, and that's on page 40. And I'm calling Richard. Kia ora, Richard. How are you? Who's our CDM Group Manager, Group Recovery Manager. So kia ora, Richard, over to you.
I'll perhaps just start talking while it's getting set up. So this is, as many of you will know, because you're on the Joint Committee for Civil Defence, this has been a project that has arisen from the following the 2021 floods. And in an emergency, if you don't know, or if you can't move around on the roads, then you're pretty well stuffed in terms of your response. So that's where it came from, of trying to get much better information about the status of our roads, and particularly the disconnect between road controlling authorities, both between districts, but also between the Whakatau, or the Transport Agency, and local roads. So we've got a little bit of a short presentation, and really just to bring you up to speed on where we're at with this. So road access is essential for emergency response, and not only for responders, but also so that the public know what is safe and where they can go. And this was highlighted in the 2021 floods, where we had things like when the state highway was closed, traffic going onto local roads, often using the GPS online maps, and heading away to roads that were also actually in worse condition and flooded. You had trucks going down roads and then coming to bridges where the weight limits prevented them from going over the bridges. So it was a ugly and unsafe situation. So following that, the coordinating executive group for CDM sponsored the creation of a system to try and provide better information. And so essentially this was the problem, that there was no authoritative source of that information, there was no joined up, there was no public view, and also needing to make sure that the information provided was timely and accurate. Our objective of the project was to have a system that provides responders and the public with that consistent, reliable, timely information on the status of roads during and after emergency events. in our initial consultation with road controlling authorities, particularly the councils, but also the transport agency, they're also saying, well, actually, why not have this information there all the time, including so that it can show non-emergency closures and those sorts of things, and alternative routes for critical road closures. So technically it's really easy, and this particular picture is actually of what Ashburton already had prior to us coming up with this tool. And so they're already sucking in the information from Whakakapi and Timaru District, as well as their own, and being able to display it. And so all we're really trying to do is extend that out across all of Canterbury and have some consistency in the way it's displayed. And this map here you'll recognise is not Canterbury, it's the Hawke's Bay. But when you look at the what Gisborne had in terms of its schema and display, then goes into Hawke's Bay, it's something different. You then go further south again, and it's different again. And that's a really good example of some of the issues and problems. So for it to be successful, you need to have that consistent schema and display so that you make it understandable by the public. But also there are issues about the accessibility for the public and also the reliability and the timeliness of the data. So I'm aware of half a dozen different solutions to this problem now across New Zealand. We've got our own, but other people are developing theirs as well. So we agreed to use the scheme of the Whakatahi, the transport agency are already using for two reasons. One is it was fairly universal and seemed to work for everybody. And secondly, trying to change Whakatahi's data was probably going to be the biggest challenge for us. So we thought you might as well start with that. But it really didn't matter so long as we used the same schema. All road controlling authorities, or at least all councils and the transport agency, are now providing data. We don't have data from, say, Department of Conservation for their roads at this point. I'm sure we could, but it's not a high priority for us. The issue of the public view is not resolved. So yes, the public can see that, but they probably need to have the link to go into Canterbury Maps and know where it is. And one of the difficulties is that you've also got journey planner, you've got each district council showing it as well, but it's all slightly different formats and so on. So having one view would be highly desirable, one place where people know they can go and get that information from. And also, as I've already mentioned, that lack of a national view or consistency is a real issue. So we will continue to maintain our tool that we've developed, and it's now available for emergency responders, so that it includes the likes of police and fire and others involved. But a key part of our recommendation is to ask the committee to recommend that the transport agency pick this up and look to develop it nationally, because there are many other tools being developed. Just prior to this meeting, we had the meeting of the Joint Committee where Whakatau presented about resilience, and I just scribbled a few things down as Stuart was talking, and it was things like it's about the community, it's not about the assets, and this absolutely aligns to that, because this is about providing the information to people. You can't build your way out of it in terms of that resilience. So you need to be agile and be able to respond better, and this is very much part of that response. Good information on alternative routes, again, that feeds into this. And from an emergency management perspective, I would add that a key part of response is trying to make sure that the consequences don't escalate. And so if you've got the hazards out there and you haven't got good information on it, and public are getting incorrect information, as we had in the Ashburton floods, then that's where the consequences do escalate and people lose their lives. So that's why, for me, this is so important. But within civil defence, we don't; they're not our assets, and we don't have the ability to further develop and maintain this, and we certainly don't have the ability to do it outside Canterbury. So that's where, from our perspective, the logical agency is the Transport Agency. I might also add, we've presented to, there's another group, the Road Efficiency Group, which is a technical advisory group, and we've also presented to other technical groups like that. There seems to be a lot of support for it, but it actually requires somebody to put up their hand and do it. So that's where we're at. And the recommendations, I think, are fairly self-explanatory. Thank you.
Thanks, Richard. Any questions from... Yep, there you go. Rory?
Thank you. I'm speaking in support of the recommendation. The only query I have, we had an incident last year, Waitangi weekend, so long weekend, huge amount of traffic on State Highway 1. Waipara was cut off by wildfire, and the alternate route was on our local road, a long, windy shingle road, which took people about 2 hours to navigate the north side of the Waipara River to the south side. A lot of, shall I say, inexperienced drivers undertook that road. So will the mapping identify the type of road that people are going to use as an alternate if it's an active access information on Google Maps or whatever? But I do speak in support of it because I think it's a really good initiative. Thank you.
I think that there's certainly possible. In that particular incident, as I understand it, the Transport Agency didn't advertise the alternative route for exactly those reasons. And it was always up to the road controlling authority to determine the alternative route. So if there's potentially even worse road, more dangerous, and the road controlling authority doesn't, then they're your roads and you decide.
So can I ask then, will that be determined as an event occurs, and the potential to not include the new status at time of need or crises, to avoid the situation being exposed again, I guess?
Yes, and if I can give you another example perhaps of that also from the 2021 floods, as I understand it, and Mayor Brown might correct me if I'm wrong, but in Ashburton you had a whole lot of traffic going down a whole lot of different roads when the state highway closed. It would have been much better to directing all that traffic down one road, just because of the extent of the road damage when it was absolutely saturated. So rather than having to repair 5 different roads that were absolutely trashed, you might trash one a whole lot more, but you're still only repairing one road. So I think choosing the routes, whether you display them, or potentially even show that route as closed and put some traffic control on it if you don't want people going down it. I think that those are all aspects that your road managers are well capable of managing and including in this map.
Thanks, Richard. Any other questions people have? Yep, Sam, and then I'll go to you, James.
You can. My question's around what is NZTA's view of making this a national and implementing it properly?
I was going to ask a similar question.
Well, thank you for asking. Because mine wasn't going to be a question, it was a comment. It was really terrible of me. This is a fantastic development. This is a fantastic tool, and it's really fabulous to see it develop so far. We absolutely acknowledge that our tools, some of which Richard has referenced, things like Journey Manager and they're all very old. And the way we as citizens interact with it, pull data from it, use it on our phones. Our GPS sends us all sorts of places because Google tells us to. Has far outpaced that tech. So if I focus on the request in Rec 3, I think it's a really great request. We want to update that tech. Whether we can prioritise the funding to do so is a key question. So my additional comment on that, and I don't know whether it really is about changing the rec or just us all as a committee remembering when it comes time for RLTP development, is to remember that these sorts of activities would be covered as a nationally delivered activity, so an NDA under the NLTP. So it's something we would do nationally. Support from region to prioritise that sort of stuff is always helpful in getting it there. You know, our digital solutions and updating our digital back end is rarely prioritised because, frankly, it can simply be more important to fix potholes. But I think this sort of stuff, that even just the progress that has been made on this tool alone has demonstrated the value of updating it. Just to speak to Murray's particular issue, I mean, getting the police, who are very often the first responders, to be aware of the tool and use it rather than to make snap judgments about sending people down a road is often a problem, and this tool makes that a whole lot easier. But nationally, for a response point of view, yes, and then also from the public-facing side is a really important step. But we need support to be able to prioritise, because even though, yes, it would be our activity and we're the ones who allocate the funding, we don't do that in a vacuum, and we do it against a policy environment that is influenced by us all. So our appetite is there, but we will need the policy support to prioritise it when it comes time to that. So, as I say, I don't think we need to update the rec, but I do think we all need to remember that this sort of thing, or speaking directly to staff, is something we need to pick up in RLTP development.
Cool. Any other questions other than we got Councillor Edge online?
Oh, just regarding the conversation just had, James might want to look at item or clause 18 on page 43, which gives some guidance in terms of how it fits in with the GPS.
If I could, yes, it does, but it is still a matter of prioritising against relative priorities, and Minister being aware of and supportive of investment in digital solutions quite clearly is always more helpful. We've got an awful lot of digital stuff that we need to do. If this is the region's priority as opposed to digital driver's licenses or those, then that's something that we need to bring forward as we develop the next plan.
Thanks, James. Good response. Gives us a good steer. Any other questions, committee members? No? Cool. Well, let's move on to the resolutions then. Well, I was just checking that you were happy with number 3, James. So
I am very.
that's
supportive
good. So, yeah, we've got those 3 there. We're happy to take them together, everybody? Yep. You happy to move, Murray? Cool. And seconded by Nigel Bowen. Thank you. So all those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Any against? That's carried. Thank you. Next one. So we're going on to our reports for information now. So we've done the tough ones. Thank you, Richard. Sorry. Thank you for that. And that's 9.1 on page 53. And this is about our resolution status report. And Jess, you're going to guide us through this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Evening committee. So yeah, all the resolutions in the paper are green at this stage, with the exception of the resolution around the deliberations from the Regional Land Transport Plan that we're 24-34 plan, which we've got on the agenda today. The update from the New Zealand Transport Agency around their state highway improvements, and we'll continue to bring through the public transport and work with Papatipura Runga as well as we progress through the years or into next year. So all other resolutions are green at this stage, and I just note that the RPTP, the Regional Public Transport hearings and deliberations, are underway, and that'll be resolved over the next 2 to 3 weeks. But happy to take any questions.
Got any questions? No? And just to note that we also have one status item in our public excluded bit as well. If we can also, if people are happy to include this in the resolutions here, so we don't have to again go into public excluded, because it's green anyway. So all good? Cool. So no other questions? Good. Okay, do I have a mover for the resolutions? Yeah, James and Neil, thank you. Any discussion? No? All those in favour, please say aye. Any against? That's carried. Thank you. Thanks, Jess. Okay, 9.2, Regional Land Transport Plan. Claire, are you coming to the table? Thank you. That's on page 61 of our agenda. And over to you, Claire, when you're ready.
This is my first time in the meeting room, so I'm just figuring out what I press. Tēnā koe, me te he mana, ko te turu hau ki te kaunihera tai ao ki Waitaha, ko Ngai Tahu hoke, tēnā koe. Tino harikoa hau ki te kōrero koe I tēnei rā. So I just said, good afternoon, Mr. Chair, the new Chair of Environment Canterbury and from Ngai Tahu, and I'm very pleased to speak to you this afternoon. I also used me te he mana, which is quite an old-fashioned way of saying Mr. Chair, just to acknowledge, and then pivoting to te turu, how far we've come in Māori and Pākehā community leadership and governance. So kia ora. So I'm presenting two papers today back to back. The first one, this one is looking backwards 10 years and the monitoring report against the previous plan. But we have replanned since then. So I just wanted to make that clear. And it's also, so this report is to support you to discharge your responsibilities to monitor the performance of the activities that are in the Regional Land Transport Plan. So it's not a state of the network type of report. It's not an operational kind of annual reporting how well an organisation is going report. It's a collective impact report. How does the collective investment shift towards the direction that's in the RLTP. So it uses very similar indicators to what you might have had come through in other types of reports, but the analysis of it is in terms of the collective impact of the committee and the overall investment in Canterbury. So in our analysis, you'll see the COVID impact on some of those indicators. So that affected how we analysed the data. So we took a long-term view. We didn't think it was very useful to say things like, oh, it's gone up in the last 3 years, if actually that's related to COVID, because you're trying to monitor the performance of the investment as opposed to what is happening. So we went back and looked from 2013 to 2023 and did a 10-year period to see if where you are collectively working together is having an impact in those areas that you want to influence. There's some information also provided in the report about the context for that. So the population growing, economic activity is occurring, the fleet is transitioning. In my notes here, I've got the level of travel caught COVID. So, and then it changed forever. So though VKT 2018 levels are similar to VKT 2022-23 levels, the nature of the travel that's happening has changed as well. So that's context for looking at some of these indicators, and we're seeing in that VKT and that type of fleet transition that, you know, there's an increase in like commercial vehicles from like online shopping and working from home. That's starting to come through in these trends. So did your collective investment make a difference? Yes, it did. So you wanted to see shift in the 2021 plan across 5 areas: safety, managing demand, sustainability and land use, managing risks and extreme events, and increasing investment in maintenance. So on page 71 to 72, hopefully, it depends on whether you're looking at 2 pages at once, but you can, if it was a printed document, you could see the table all in one spread and see the greens and the blues. There is a lot of blues, unfortunately, so that was where either the trend was unclear or we only had snapshot information available and we hadn't had a trend over time, so we couldn't actually report on the trend over time. And we've kind of made comment on, is it good or bad? It's kind of hard when you're looking for impact of investment if you've just got a snapshot. So overall, yes with safety, 2 thumbs up, like green on all the indicators. You're really seeing that focus on safety is driving improvements in safety. In terms of the targets that were set and how close we are to those, that wasn't part of the analysis of the report. So that you will probably be aware of other reports around safety in terms of comparing Australia to New Zealand and things like that. But of course, safety never stops. But just wanted to encourage you that it's having an impact. Injuries per vehicle kilometre travelled, 17% reduction over 10 years, and crashes from trucks, 33% reduction over 10 years. And an interesting insight from that was that the crashes from trucks didn't substantially reduce during those COVID-affected years. So it's what that kind of means is that the nature of the transport that's on the roads, so the proportion of cars to trucks, didn't affect the number of crashes, because we had the number of cars come right down. But we kind of had in Canterbury the number of heavy vehicles kind of stayed the same because it was essential service related. So that will mean that the factors that are affecting truck crashes are things like the driver, the vehicle, the road environment, those types of things, rather than if there are cars on the road with the trucks at the same time. So it's not often you get the opportunity to do that kind of snapshot. What if we pulled all the cars off the road and saw what happened to the truck crashes? So there's some silver linings coming out of that data from COVID. The next part down is managing demand. So what this is investing in responding to changes in population, movement, freight, those sorts of things, and if that's being done in a sustainable way. And from the indicators that we had, it's looking solid. So some of the indicators we couldn't get data for, or if we did, it might only represent Christchurch and it wouldn't represent the whole region, which then it's not really a regional report if you're talking about something that's happening on a very metropolitan central city type of space. But again, that's looking good. And then in terms of investing in a way that is sustainable and integrated with land use, that's where it got unclear. So I can't say it's a maybe, I can't say it's neutral, I can't say it's good, or I can't say it's bad. We just couldn't get the data to say 2 thumbs up. But some of the indicators are looking really good. So in terms of emissions reduction and things like that. And that increase in PT boardings coming in at the end there, which we expect to see, well, that's probably the next paper actually is talking about what we expect to see going forward. Then managing the risk of extreme events. This was the indicator that is in the downward trend. So this is the one that isn't on track out of the whole report. So it's a largely positive report. So 2021 plan was when we first put resilience in as a priority, and we didn't have that many activities proposed that related to it. So there wasn't a lot of investment. Like thinking about this as a report that's about the collective investment, there wasn't a lot of investment to try and address that indicator. So yeah, it's not on track. But then again, we have now got the 2024 plan where you increase the weighting on that resilience. We saw a lot more activities come in. It's been given a lot more priority. So that's still an indicator to watch, but you have replanned to refocus on that. And then the last one was the increased investment in maintenance. So the reporting period for this is the 2021 to 24 NLTF amounts. So it's not the 2024 allocations. So the report shows that investment did go up, but not enough for the rate that costs were going up, and that there was still a lot of money being put in by councils funding their own things. So in summary, safety, 2 thumbs up, managing demand, 2 thumbs up, sustainability, land use, unclear, bit of a grey space, maintenance, one up, one down, and the managing risks wasn't going so well. So that's the looking backwards report. But in summary, I think having that many indicators going well is a sign of good collective impact. I'll take
Thank you, Claire. Any questions for our members? No, all pretty self-explanatory and pretty good. Thank you, Claire. Really good summary of what's in here, so thank you. Grant, you've got a question.
Oh, so yes, Claire, I'm just wondering, were you surprised by, I was looking at page 70, the third bullet, about the Greater Christchurch over that 10-year period, an increase of patronage of only 3%. Did that surprise you?
Yeah, we had a lot of discussions about this indicator, how to treat this indicator, the nature of the report, the analysis, what was actually going on in the ground, and that, yeah, that's kind of coming out without a visual, because the analysis was a visual analysis in terms of the slope, and then also because for all the indicators we took out that kind of first 3 years, meant that we couldn't say, well, super green in Greater Christchurch for PT. We had to say it was neutral, and we couldn't say that it was looking good, but it is looking good. Like in terms of what's happened since COVID, I think, and the reports to Environment Canterbury have been that, you know, they've navigated that national impact of the driver shortages and seeing that increased patronage. So yeah, does that answer your question?
Yeah, great. Thanks, Claire.
Cool.
Yeah, I was going to note that we are up to pre-earthquake levels again in Greater Christchurch, which is really good, 14.5 million rides. So yeah, and especially in the last year or so, it's just really bounced back, and that, you know, the fair trial might have had something to do with that. Well, that's the indication, so that's good. We've got some new challenges, of course, in that space, but thank you, Claire, and thanks, Grant. Yeah, Sam.
This is on page 89, 26 of the report. The nitrogen dioxide measures. Is that purely fleet related, or are there things that we could be doing ourselves around shifting? I guess if there's a mode shift, that's helpful to get people out of their cars. But with the electrification of the fleet, will also drive that down?
So fleet electrification and mode shift and different urban arrangements so people can access essential services without jumping in a car. So there's, you know, it's avoid, shift, improve. All of those kind of interventions can reduce NO2, but largely what's driving it is the fleet transition. So it was quite interesting looking at the fleet transition and how much more it had transitioned than what was predicted when we did our intervention logic in 2021, where we had kind of thought that maybe you might get 5% of the fleet transitioning. And we've seen about 15% of the fleet transitioning, 5% being, you know, zero, very low emission, and about 10% being moderate emission. So this is, 25% less emissions than a standard petrol vehicle, but it's still a petrol vehicle just because the new cars are so much more efficient. So that's really, that fleet transition has driven a lot of that impact on greenhouse gases and NO2. And there's also, you know, government, national policies that came in around that started driving that when we did the RLTP theory of change and things like that, we didn't know that was going to come or happen. So, yeah.
Any other questions? No, doesn't look like it. Cool. So we've got our 3 resolutions here. So just receiving the report, noting the report be made available on our ECAN's website, and that will be a revised report coming. So all good. You want to move it, Sam? Thank you. And seconded by Nigel. Thank you. All those in favour, please say aye. Any against? That's carried. Thank you. Thanks, Claire. Are you staying for the next one? I understand. So cool. 9.3. I will hand over back to you. Thank you.
Cool. So the last report was looking back 10 years. this report, we've got a new 2024 10-year plan, and we've had the NLTF funding allocations come out, and they have a significant impact on the 10-year plan. So this report is updating you on what the impacts of that will be on the 10-year plan. It's a bit of a roller coaster. There's goods and bads. So thinking about those kind of 5 areas that you wanted to have impact on, So essentially, in the RLTP, we did acknowledge that there was a risk of underfunding. So it had about 10 billion in it. We thought that there might be a risk of underfunding of about 4 billion, and the amount that's been allocated over the next 3 years is on par with what we predicted for the RLTP. So as a strategy advisor, it's bittersweet because it's like, well, I did a good job of telling you the risk and estimating the size, but then it's not great that we've realised that risk now. So we did get more money in some areas, and we did get better alignment to the priorities than what we did in 2021. So we had a lot more of our top 10 improvements funded than what we did in 2024. But we're still only getting like kind of 6.5% of the national bucket compared with, say, other regions and the amounts that they're getting. So in terms of the kind of 5 areas of investment priority, in terms of maintenance and operations, if I use my thumbs again, so that's 1 thumb up that there was more money there, but 1 thumb down and that it was gappy. So there's not much flexibility there. So things like not getting vegetation maintenance and stuff to deal with snow for Canterbury is, that's not great. Things like not enough money for signage, not enough money to then address the speed changes and things like that. So that's kind of happening across Canterbury. But having more money is great. The other thing with the inflexibility on how it's allocated is it does reduce some of the value for money, because if you wanted to go in and do some of the stuff with the pothole money, you don't then have the money to do something else at the same time. So then you would have to go back and do it again later. So it's hard to operate. Now, was that the intention of the GPS? And could I sit here and say to you, that's the new normal, everybody pivot, suck it up? I don't know, because the GPS came out so late. It could be a symptom of it arriving late and NZTA having 6 months to try and figure out how to deliver an NLTF that gives effect to it, versus usually they would get, a year and a half and templates would be updated and those kind of things. So I just can't tell you if it's this is the new normal, or a NZTA will probably sort this out next time round. The next priority that you had was that managing risks, and that's 2 thumbs up. More money, better alignment, looking really good. So the Ashburton Bridge, although there's the gap there, having at least some money chucked towards it and is better than what it was. But it's still not 100% funded like some of those other roads of regional significance are 100%. But then, so you're seeing some of those other bridges come through as well, and the state highway resilience work as well. Safety, I would give it 1 up, 1 down. So you got money for big state highway capital improvements, but then not money for your low cost, low risk safety improvements. And without that flexibility with the maintenance on operations and renewals funding, then if you didn't get your low cost, low risk, you can't then move around your maintenance and operations and renewals and kind of deal with it. So the kind of lack of flexibility in some of the way that funding is allocated when you're in a strategic shift, when you've got a new GPS that's making a big pivot and then you don't get the flexibility, it's quite difficult to transition. Freight, we don't have a lot in the RLTP in terms of freight, but where the money did go, some was funded, some wasn't. But on the whole, I'd give it's a neutral. I don't think you need to be concerned about it. But yeah, so it's not necessarily detrimental that there's less money in that freight space. And then the public transport and active transport, this really was a major concern because effectively there's no major improvements in public transport and active transport funded across Canterbury. So that's the consequence of that, along with the imbalance between state highway and local roads, kind of low cost, low risk. You're looking at strategic, operational, financial, and reputational risks across Canterbury. Some of those strategic risks would be people in, from Ashburton to Amberley kind of hitting Greater Christchurch, and then the Greater Christchurch transport network isn't really responding to it. So that kind of vision, the long-term vision of having connected across Canterbury and people just flowing in and out and getting to where they need to go, without the improvements and the investment in the improvements, how they're prioritised in the RLTP, you're not going to see that created in the long term. If it doesn't resolve by 2027, you're starting to look at real problems. You're also starting to look at real problems in terms of your staff. If the things that you're planning and improving to do and you're not and they can't do that, it has operational efficiency impacts like disengagement, or people, you might ask them to replan something or have a look at something and they'll kind of feel like, oh, is this actually going to make a difference, because we never get any money to do it. So there's those kind of operational impacts as well. Reputational impacts in terms of communication with the community, setting expectations that then can't be met. There's just a lot of issues that emerge from how the funding's been allocated and not in the way that's prioritised. And it will start to have economic impacts as well, in terms of, well, you can't get out of Christchurch, or whatever that might be. Land value along some of those MRT routes, those sorts of things. So I can't stress enough to you the detrimental long-term impacts if the approach to funding allocation continues, in terms of misalignment with planned priorities, gaps that reduce value for money, and the lack of flexibility. That's kind of the punchline. And in terms of, like I've just given you a report on the previous plan, based on how the money is allocated, and imagining what if I came back in 3 years' time with the report, 9 of your 16 indicators might not have shifted. So I know that there's other spaces where there's more money being put in and there's been better alignment, but I have to tell you that it's not working for Canterbury. I don't know if that's the same for every region. I can't tell you if we're in the same bucket as other regions in terms of their allocations, because they're getting different amounts of money, and I haven't done that analysis. So there is hope in that some of the improvements for public transport are in the NLTF as possibles and probables, but that is dependent on there being underspends in other regions and NZTA finding the money and then being able to contribute it. So I guess with these
So you got a question, Anne?
Yeah,
Right.
just in regards to that, you're saying that ongoing it's going to be damaging and detrimental. So is that something as a committee we should be raising? If this is an area of concern, I mean, if we know now that this is going down a pathway of damage and detriment, shouldn't we be raising it?
Definitely, and we have. I mean, we have made the point about the percentage of the funding that Canterbury has got, those sorts of things. Well, Jess,
So, yeah, through
I've not been here that long, remember?
So you remember the committee wrote to the Minister in particular after the GPS came out and the NLTF funding around the investment in public transport in particular, and the lack of investment and lack of improvement funding. So that is, we have written to the Minister. I'm happy to circulate that letter again if that's...
I know, but this is giving more evidence.
Oh, yeah, no.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So it is a similar.
I think I got another
sorry.
comment. So, way you go, Nigel.
Oh, no, similar.
Sorry,
and I was going to raise this either today or tomorrow as far as the advocacy piece. And, I was just talking to James earlier. One thing we probably haven't done either from the forum or this committee is really lobby the Canterbury MPs to get behind with some support. So I think we do need to take that further. So, Jess, that would be the first step I expect, and whether we continue the conversation and we'll pick it up tomorrow as well would be important, yeah.
Thanks, Nigel. James, you got a comment?
Yeah, not wanting to disagree with the general thrust of the argument because I think there is merit there, clear, but I think there is also something there about that layering effect of the different roles of the different plans or programs. So, I've said this before, an RLTP has to be consistent with the GPS. The NLTP has to give effect to the GPS. Those things are different things, and the overlap between the two can be quite different. Now, yes, the GPS was late. So the time between the release of the GPS and the publication of the NLTP was very short. And that therefore also gave us all less time to respond to those signals and align accordingly. But the NLTP is giving effect to government policy in that sense. The RLTP isn't necessarily. In that sense, the expression of the ambitions of us all for transport in Canterbury can be misaligned quite deliberately with government policy. But that misalignment will mean lack of alignment over funding. So I guess I'm trying to target the ask for better aligned government policy to Canterbury's needs is more likely to see more money flow to Canterbury. I'm not sure how far that takes us, but there really is an important point between giving effect to and being consistent with. It is absolutely legitimate for Canterbury to decide this is our direction, and we accept that there is a difference between what government wants to purchase and what we want to do. They have to be consistent, but there is a trade-off there. Funding will not necessarily follow, and that is the consequence. So,
you did say before, James, that we have to signal, though, don't we? Like in the last conversation about the road thing, that we have to signal through our policy what we want to see. So, I get that. So there's always going to be a bit of misalignment potentially, but it's important to keep advocating, I suppose, for what we need as well. Yeah, Neville.
I haven't been sitting around this table before, but certainly been around a lot of tables in the last 24 years. And alignment's been sung for the 24 years I've been sitting around a table. Nothing ever happens. So I don't think it's actually about singing that song. How do you make it happen? That's the one that needs to start to be sung, because it's never changed in my time of sitting around here, the alignment. So I think there needs to be some real runs on the ground, not just from this committee, but from all of our councils about actually, and Canterbury councils about making it align.
If you'll indulge me, Mr. Chair, I think the devil really is in the detail, because, as Claire noted, major projects, major priorities for this committee were funded this time round. So, most of the significant priorities for Canterbury have received funding. It's just in order to do that, funding has moved away from areas we might not have realised it would move away from in order to do that. And so, the devil is in the detail and how those priorities are communicated. Please fund this, but don't take it off this is a different message than please fund this. And please fund this was really the message we were all communicating. It takes an awful lot of money to fund a bypass, for example. And you'll see in my presentation where the money has gone on state highways, for example. I just think it is about being clear on nuance, because nuance matters clearly in where the money has gone this time around.
Yeah, I think if I could summarise what... Oh, sorry.
Well, so Sam.
Oh, it's just for context around this discussion, because we changed our RLTP when the new government came in, and we reprioritised projects because there were arguments made that we wanted to be as aligned with National's incoming policy as possible. And so there was a reordering of things, and it wasn't the way that staff had come to us to tell us the way that they needed to be beforehand. And then this table shuffled them because we said we want to get as aligned as we can with national. So, I mean, we can blame and point the fingers at others, but actually some of the reason why we got what we did was because politically we chose to do that, and we pulled some stuff differently as well.
I think that the underlying thing, though, is if we got the percentage that we probably should get, maybe we don't have a problem. So that's another, that's probably the real key message, and maybe, Anne, that's what you're alluding to. I mean, it could sound like a bit of a broken record, but we probably just need to keep saying it over and over, that percentage really rightfully should come to Canterbury, and then we wouldn't complain. It would be fair, and we would have what we need to do the bulk of what we're asking for. So I think it's a good point that you've raised, Dan, and I mean, happy to add it as another resolution if we want to say and you said, Nigel, about our local MPs, so happy to say something along those lines when we get to the resolutions about adding that, or just put a note in our minutes about following up on that, and happy to work with all of you here to do that. Cool. But, yeah, Craig?
Just one quick thing is I think we need to highlight the implications of we can put up with this for one cycle, but if you do it again in the next cycle, there's going to be severe damage, and the third cycle's you're taking a step back every time. So I think it's a case of highlighting that, okay, it's been done to us this time, but if you do it to us next time, there's going to be some real degradation in the roading network in the South Island.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to say it too. Yeah, Neil?
I think they've done it for a couple of cycles now.
Yeah.
It's showing in our highway and our local roads now. They're deteriorating badly. We can't keep up with the money we've got. They're going backwards.
Cool. I think that's good. Well, when we get to the resolutions, we can pick that back up. But Claire, you want to finish off?
Yeah, I did just want to point out that, which was the point you raised, that it's actually been many funding rounds of this, and through different GPSs under different governments as well. So it's something in the system that's making it happen. So that's why what we're doing is looking at options in terms of, well, where does it actually fit for Canterbury? Is it something internally that we're doing, or is it actually an external setting that's leading to this level of funding?
Do we know what Canterbury produces, sends to Wellington, and road user charges and excise duty, and what we get back? We know what we get back. Do we know what we send from road user charges and petrol excise duty?
I don't have updated figures, but there was a report done within the last 6 years, I would say, that showed that there is more being contributed than what is coming back in. I have looked at, because with the GPS and what it was saying about where the funding mechanisms are going, I have had a quick squiz at if every vehicle in Canterbury shifted to ruck, what amount of money that might be. And over, if you're thinking of like a 10-year period, it would be, somewhere between a $4.5 billion, something like that. So there is definitely a lot being generated out of here, but I don't have a figure for ruck and fed in the last 3 years exactly what it is, but definitely there's a misalignment.
Yeah, I've got Nigel, and then I'll come to you, James. Yeah.
Supplementary then.
Yep.
The one that was done 6 years ago, it's probably still relative. The numbers won't be the same, but it might be relativity. Perhaps you could share that report with us, because I don't think many of us here were 6 years ago to have seen it.
Nigel?
Thanks. And we, 2022, we did a piece of work like that for South Canterbury prior to the election, so that would be easy enough. And I did actually note it for part of the regional deals conversation, because transport obviously a key one across Canterbury. So I think that's another way or another position where that conversation should be had, that, we're expecting a level of consistent funding for the network, if you like. Yeah.
Cool. James?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I would just note those sorts of analyses are noisy. They're imperfect. Yeah, that's a good word. They're imperfect. They're imperfect. Fed data is relative. Fuel excise duty data is relatively easy, I understand, to split because the fuel companies are reasonably happy to provide it. Road user charge data is much noisier. It can depend on where the entity is paying its ruck. Fonterra, for example, for a long time paid its ruck in Waikato. They've got trucks moving nationally. That does not mean that the Waikato is paying, ought to have, in that argument, the benefit of all that ruck paid into the Waikato system. So that's the analysis part, and I would just make the point, which I make every time. There has, at least in my memory, like my living memory, never been a government policy to equitably fund regions based on either population or GDP or ruck or fed. You can advocate for it. Southland is currently, for example, trying to advocate for that. But that is not the basis for funding decisions, and has never been the basis for funding decisions.
Part of that analysis for the South Canterbury, we did pull data through Fonterra, Clandyboy, etc. And so I'd say it's definite. I'd say it was perfect for my perfect argument to support funding into South Canterbury, which I didn't get. But we should at least try, shouldn't we? So it's a good argument. It's a good argument around, and this is the challenge that economic analysis economic activity is not part of the matrix as far as road user funding, but there's a fair argument with government priority around GDP and all those sort of things that it should be. And that would be my argument, my very perfect argument.
Thanks, Nudge. Any other questions for Claire on this? No? Jess, and you wanted to mention, you mentioned about the workshop.
Right, yeah. So early next year, what we wanted to bring back and workshop with the committee is around the GPS and the priorities for the next GPS, leading into the RLTP review for 2027. So hold some of these thoughts for that. The other thing is Claire is also working a funding and financing project, and so some of these questions around where does funding come from, how do we change the tools and levers that we have, and those type of things, we'll be bringing some of that information back as part of the work program as well. So just bear those two things in mind. Totally take on board the lobbying of government advocacy in that respect, and we'll share some of those reports as well, but just bear those two things in mind, that we'll bring those back to the committee early next year.
Good. Thanks, Claire. Shall we go to the resolutions? So we've got a couple here, and like we said, we could add something here if we wanted to. So we're just going to receive that report from Claire, thank you, and note that there'll be another report in May. And like Jesse said, there's also the workshop in February following up on this as well. Do people anyone want to put another note in there about doing another joint advocacy to government about the funding? We happy to do that, or do you just want to do it as a note? Secretarial note. Okay, I'm happy with that.
Yeah,
we'll bring it up tomorrow. Then.
Yeah, we'll bring it up, and if Jesse can still share that, it'd be great.
Cool, thank you. All good. Do I have a mover for these resolutions? Yep, Sam. Seconder. Yep, Craig. Thank you. All those in favour, please say aye. Any against? It's carried. Thank you. We'll go to 9.4. And James, you're up. You can get out of that chair and into the other one, mate. So this is our NZTA State Highway Program report. So over to you when you're ready.
Fantastic. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Right. I think this is...
James, Murray, you got a question?
I'm just conscious that some of us may be attending the retirement dinner for Gil Cox, so...
What time do you have to go?
It's at 6 o'clock.
6 o'clock,
So
okay.
I'm just conscious of the time and...
How many people are...
I think it would be... Yeah.
Okay, cool.
I'm
Thank
just
you.
concerned that I don't want to go
We've only
late
got
to that,
a
so
couple
thank
more
you.
yet.
Sorry.
All good. There you go, James.
No, that's a good reminder, Murray. I won't. I mean, you've got the presentation in your notes. I'll fly through it. We can come back and forward if you've got particular questions. I won't step through it slowly. So look, this was I think responding to a request to just go through in detail what actually made it into the NLTP in the state highway investment proposal, as opposed to what we asked to have funded, because as per the previous discussion, sometimes those things can be quite different. So I'll run through it, and I know the request talked about improvements, but honestly, I will start at maintenance because that is a significant funding priority for us, and you might like to see where we propose to invest over the next period in terms of maintaining the state highway. Always best to look after what you've got before you add to it. I won't run through this slide more than just to note that the things called out in bold are the GPS priorities. So those are the funding priorities and the policy settings that we're operating in. That's what we're trying to seek through the investment. That's what's been prioritised. Right, so increased maintenance. You've heard me say it. You've all said it yourselves in one way or another. Significant money redirected into maintenance this cycle, broken this time round into the two categories of operations and pothole prevention. You can see in the table on the bottom left the total investment in the two activity classes for the Canterbury State Highway Network, and our ambitions, our proposal in terms of both seals and rehabs. And the key thing to note is that the investment in pothole prevention this cycle significantly increases the lane kilometres for rehabs. So rehabilitations are where we stop, we dig out the road, we fundamentally refix the base, and we build the road back up. Hopefully stops the potholes actually coming again, and that gives you a fundamentally better road. Reseals are quite that, literally that, sealing over the cracks, chipping it usually, and patching it. Reseals are a really important job, but you can only reseal a piece of tarmac for so long until the point at which the sealing just simply won't work. And that is really, at writ large, what we have been trying to do for probably the last 10 years on the state highway networks. Too much reseals, not enough rehabs, and rehabs are fundamentally more expensive than reseals. So we are, over the 3-year period, shifting the balance. I mean, you'll still do more seals than rehabs at any one time, but we are doing more rehabs this period. The period after this one, 27-30, you should expect to see us do more rehabs again. So we are building our capacity to do rehabs as we redirect the focus. You can see the network length there for Canterbury. We have a significant state highway network, and there's no small investment in maintaining the network for the state highway for Canterbury. I couldn't tell you, frankly, what thin asphaltic concrete is relative to any other kind of treatment. If we need to go to the detail, I'm going to pretend that Chad and Rhiannon on the screen can save me. But you will see over the 3-year period, when I pull the maps up on the big screen, significant attention to the state highway. So there's North Canterbury. For the purposes of this demonstration, Selwyn District is considered North Canterbury. Mr. Mayor? Sorry that the red and the pink are a little bit hard to distinguish between year 1 and year 3, but hopefully you can see from that the sense that we are intending to be looking at pretty much the state highway network in North Canterbury one way or the other over this 3 years. And you can see the breakdowns. If you're interested in particular parts of the network, look, feel free to come up to me afterwards, drop me an email if you've run off to Gil's retirement gig, and I'll happy to address particular concerns and where things sit on the program. Different place, slightly different map. This is South Canterbury. You will see here, hopefully, that the focus is fairly understandably more focused on the much higher volume parts of the network. For those elected representatives from this part of the world, you might like to stay on top of that with me and watch and see how levels of service develop on the main state highways versus the less trafficked state highways. It is absolutely true that we are focusing more on State Highway 1 than on other parts of the State Highway network. But I think we will all be interested to see how that plays out in terms of the experience of your communities. So Anne and Craig in particular, I expect you to be in touch if things aren't up to scratch. Yep. I'll bet you are. Moving on to resilience. Again, staying in South Canterbury, really, we already ought to be working with your teams on, particularly Craig, on these bridges. Look, they're not particularly large bridges, but it is a really good opportunity to get in and upgrade them, replace them. And I know we've already had dialogue about how in alignment and what things we can do on the local network, but really nice to be able to tick off a few bridges. And I know we probably have many more discussions to have over bridges in the next 3-year period across the region, but just glad to be able to get some along. I know there is significant discomfort around the room on low cost, low risk in this NLTP, which was flagged in the previous report. It is worth noting that NZTA was slightly more successful in getting low cost, low risk funding than local authorities. So there is still some low cost, low risk activity in the state highway program. And whilst we don't have the details of the small resilience projects in this presentation, again, I'm happy to show you where we are working to address things like rock scaling and rock armouring and taking out dips and those sorts of things. They are all low-level projects, but they all add to the resilience of the network. But as per the discussion, for those of you who were here for the CDM, they are not the big-scale resilience projects that I know we are all thinking long-term about. Safety. Safety is a big pivot in this NLTP, and it's a big change for the state highway network. I had a conversation with Nigel just before this meeting. The Minister made some fairly fundamental changes to safety in the GPS and how safety was funded and allocated, and long story short, he moved safety from its own safety improvements from its own activity class back into the improvements activity classes. So for us, back into state highway improvements, which means safety interventions on the state highway are competing for priority against, in the state highway network, the roads of national significance. That's the big 1,000-pound gorilla. And so the sorts of safety projects that we were trying to advance in a number of communities in Canterbury and around the rest of the country simply aren't able to be accounted for in this NLTP. We love acronyms at NZTA. We now have value for money safety, and that really represents the $200 million that's been set aside nationally across the 3-year period for safety interventions specifically, which in the context of the overall state highway improvements budget is very small. It means that for communities like Nigel's and for Craig's, for Timaru St Andrews, for communities like Waimakariri, for State Highway 1 and State Highway 71, we simply can't proceed with those projects because there isn't the money to be able to proceed with them. We've allocated that money under the GPS direction to projects like Belfast to Pegasus, the Woodend Bypass. And that is simply us responding to the government signals of the day. We will have some money for some safety interventions, much more limited in scope rather than corridor treatments. And the priority in this region for this period is likely to be a place on State Highway 1 just south of Rolleston, Burnham, where we hope to make progress on putting in a roundabout finally to address that terrible intersection. But a roundabout at Burnham is a significant impact on even the national budget for this sort of intervention. On Burnham, you should see us widening and strengthening parts of the state highway between Duns Crossing and Burnham this summer, so that we can then move on to a roundabout at Burnham next summer. Speed management. Actually, I will just pick up a point I forgot to make in Claire's report last item here. On speed management clearly going to be a big issue for us. We've got a huge program of change directed at us from the Minister's changes to the speed rule, as I know you all have. Claire made a point in her report, which was very probably accurate at the time, because our board only met on this issue last week, so it's not me blaming you, Claire. We have taken a position to the board, and the board has agreed, because the GPS, again, is fairly clear. We are expecting local authorities to come to us for funding, extra funding, for the cost of implementing the speed rule. So please, the report notes that there isn't funding and that will have an impact, because the operations budget, which is where you'd normally fund it from, is deeply constrained. We are treating the speed rule implementation as additional. So your teams ought to be, once they've worked through the impact of the speed rule, coming to us with funding bids over and above, which is helpful, but equally will consume an awful lot of time and resource. Major capital works, the big stuff. Right, so the big project for us this period and into the next period is the delivery of the Road of National Significance in Canterbury, which is called by us the Belfast to Pegasus, State Highway 1 Belfast to Pegasus and the Wood End Bypass. And that's just a way of referring to the corridor. Really, it runs in the south, which is on the left-hand side of this slide, from the point at which State Highway 1 goes from 2 lanes each way to 1 lane each way under the tram road. It is the tram road off-ramp. No, it's the next one. Oh, Smith Street off-ramp. You're quite right. So where it goes from 2 to 1 lane each way, all the way up William Street, at the point at William Street, which is Pine Acres, we leave the current State Highway 1 alignment, and we will push on through the Ready Mix Lakes. I'm sure I'll get a question on that in a minute. Swing around the east of Wood End, swing back through the very narrow gap between the golf course and the top end of Wood End to land back at the current roundabout for Pegasus and Ravenswood. Board decisions that we've taken very recently, the important ones that make you aware of, agreement to stay within the current designation, which keeps us on track in terms of timeframe, and to vary the scheme design that was designed back in 8 years ago, when the designation was put in place, so that we will no longer be having a roundabout at the north end, at the Pegasus roundabout, recognising that the growth at Pegasus and Ravenswood is now so large as to make that functionally not possible. We will have a grade separated interchange at Ravenswood and Pegasus. So that means that if you think in your head of what you see, although not with the art, at the airport. So certainly the local road connection, east-west, Ravenswood and Pegasus, will stay at grade, and we will take the highway over that to enable traffic to flow freely in all directions. There's just now simply too much traffic trying to use that one connection, and it won't work. So, look, I won't dwell on this. You've got this in your pack. I've just talked through most of this, but our biggest priority is making progress on Belfast to Pegasus. It's been a priority for the local community for a long time. I'm sure you were very pleased to see it included as a road of national significance in the GPS. And we've now done in a year, we've done in half a year what would take us probably 18 months in previous approaches. We are busting all sorts of processes and practices in order to make things move fast. And another comment that Claire made in her report, again, not picking on her because she's not wrong, we are very much trying to streamline our processes and make sure that they don't cost ourselves and everyone else time and money, when actually what we want to see is projects implemented on the ground. There's enough cost in pavement and bitumen and everything else, frankly, than not to spend it on consultants. And that's probably that. I'll flick through all of this, and we can come through it on conversations. So board made a decision last week before. We have approved the project for design. So it is of the 17 roads of national significance, it is the furthest through the program. So it is the closest to realisation. the one moving fast. To be fair, it started an awful lot further ahead because it had a designation and we'd done a lot of the major work. We will. That tender for design closes this side of Christmas. We will evaluate the tender over Christmas. We will be awarding the design tender soon after Christmas. And a key part of that tender is design of an early works package that will see us start work on this project in the ground in 2026, which is great news for the community. Fully delivered, hopefully 28. Roads of regional significance. We have 3 on our books, and there is one more on the province's books, but not on ours. That's the Ashburton one. The ones on our books are Rolleston, which I was out with Selwyn District Council talking through them earlier in the week. So that's the improvements to Dunn's Crossing roundabout and the flyover of State Highway 1 to join Rolleston without being severed by the state highway to join the residential side of Rolleston with the industrial side of Rolleston. We have the Horsell Road improvements underway right now. Those of you who visited the show or the Santa Parade probably encountered our roadworks. Apologies for that, but we'll be out of the ground as fast as we can. And Brougham Street corridor is currently funded to complete design, to complete pre-implementation and pause awaiting funding for implementation. It was not able to be prioritised in the NLTP. There simply wasn't enough money. Future planning. Sorry, last one, Murray. I know you need me to stop, but I just did want to draw your attention to these. It's a pity Phil isn't in the room. We've got some quite important planning work. One of the ways we ensure that funding comes to the region is having projects of significance in the pipeline that are ready to go and that are stacked up. The one probably of most interest to most in the room here is the second bullet point, piece of work that we've sort of targeted at the corridor between the two ports. There's a lot of Christchurch work there, but fundamentally one of the questions that ought to address is when is the right time to advocate for laning. And I know, Nigel, you've been keen to see that sort of thing goes further south than Ashburton, that we talk about the full corridor properly. No doubt there's desire to take it even further south from Timaru, but we'll get at least as far as Timaru this time round in terms of understanding what the drivers and triggers and growth projections of that are. Also worth pointing out the third bullet. We know we have sort of the last piece of the Christchurch highway network that hasn't been significantly looked at for major upgrade and realignment is that corner around Hornby. You still have to drive through Hornby on the state highway. Christchurch City has heavy traffic bypasses and all sorts of things, and we've long had plans and backdraws for deviations around Pound Road and all sorts of those sorts of things. We know if Hornby is to grow the way that it is projected to grow, we probably need to move the state highway out of Hornby. We need to start that kind of work. So this is the beginning of that kind of work. Pātai.
Kia ora, James. Questions, anybody? No, I think we're pretty well briefed on that. Thanks, James. So we'll go to the resolutions, eh? So thank you so much, James. You can probably... Oh, Grant, you got a question?
Oh, just a quick question about the Pegasus bypass and the the underpass at where that roundabout is at the moment. Is that also a location for on-off ramps?
Yes, absolutely.
To Pegasus?
Yes, absolutely.
Does that mean that because you're doing that now, that there will be facilities for a sufficient space for pedestrians and cyclists to get between Ravenswood and Pegasus?
It's almost like you're a councillor from Waimakariri District, Grant. Yes, there absolutely will.
Brilliant, thanks.
Thank you. Okay, let's do the resolutions and you can come back to the other seat. So receiving the report and noting that we'll continue to deliver all the projects. So Sam, you'll move it. Nigel, seconded. Thank you. All those in favour, please say aye. Any against? That's carried. Cool. We'll go to 9.5, South Island Freight Study. And Tom, you're going to present. So Murray, where's the thing you got to go to? Peppers. Okay. Oh, true. You might need to. Yeah, who else has got to? You probably need to go. You all good? So just used to, or all good? Cool. We still have a quorum, maybe. We'll check. Should be half, isn't it? So it should be half of 10 or 11. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Should still have enough. Sorry, Tom. Sorry to keep you waiting. We'll carry on the interim. So where you go, Tom?
Kia ora koutou, and thank you, Mr. Chair. I will take the report as read in the interest of time and do my best just to provide a quick summary. The purpose of this report is to share the key findings of Phase 1 of the South Island Freight Study with the committee and to outline the next steps for the project. Phase 1 of the South Island Freight Study has now been completed, and the report was received by the South Island Chairs Group at their latest meeting held the 11th of November. The study aimed to identify and address gaps in the freight evidence base to support more effective infrastructure planning and investment. The key activities that covered in Phase 1 were focused on really understanding the current state of the freight evidence base, including how it is used and where there are any challenges. This was primarily achieved through numerous interviews with infrastructure owning agencies and a comprehensive literature review. The findings were then analysed and used to form a detailed action plan which clearly outlines the path that the South Island Chairs may wish to pursue over the short, medium and long term to deliver a better understanding of freight. A range of detailed actions can be found within the study, which is included as attachment 9.5.1. These really focus on leveraging existing data sources, filling identified gaps through the development of new tools and data which may be held elsewhere or by other agencies, and by standardising the use of data in the long term to ensure we are making comparable freight investment decisions. Scoping for Phase 2 of the project has now begun, which will be developed with input from councils across the South Island, as well as NZTA, Kiwi Rail and the Ministry of Transport. The scope for Phase 2 is expected to be provided to the South Island Chairs Group in April 2025, and this committee thereafter in May. I'll take the rest of the report as read and welcome any questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Tom. Any questions from our members? Sam?
Yeah, I want to firstly say thanks for the work, and it's great to see this focus on freight, which heavy transport is one of those areas that we continue to talk about here as being a key contributor to our roading conditions, and focus on rail and the connection between Timaru and Littleton ports being a key part of Canterbury's freight network as well. I'm just wondering, the outcomes from Phase 1, has it brought up anything that, were kind of real surprises are out of the blue compared to the freight study that was done, the South Island Freight Study 2019 or 2018? There was that previous kind of rather large study that feels like we just sat on, and here we are doing another study.
I think the biggest, finding or revelation really was that there actually is quite a lot of data out there that can paint a really useful picture. Through some conversations that we've had with NZTA, specifically their planning and investment evidence team, they've been procuring some data from eRoads through Rob Insight, which covers, I believe, 50% of the heavy freight movements, at least on road. And that data's kind of hasn't been available previously, at least not in the previous study. So I think moving forward, we've realised that actually we have an opportunity here to really paint a very vivid picture of freight movements within the South Island, whereas previously I think there might have been a bit more forecasting and guesswork involved.
And one other partner that I'm not sure what your connection with them is going to be is Lincoln University, and I was just really surprised over the last couple of weeks to find out that international logistics is like one of their most popular courses, which is cool that we've got people training in that here. And for Canterbury, so much of what we produce is freight for export, and so just connecting in that knowledge that they have and pathways for future employment in the management of freight away from Canterbury, but also across Canterbury, just could be a good partner.
Yeah, 100% agree. Something that I've found really interesting and engaging with this work as well as going through the University of Canterbury as well, And I think that we have a lot of resource in that kind of academic space that we perhaps don't use enough through our work here. So definitely something that we're aware of and looking forward to doing.
Any other questions? No. Hey, thanks, Tom. Thanks, Sam. We've got our resolutions here. We've got 4 of them. Take them all together. Do I have a mover for them? Yep, Sam. Seconder. Craig, thank you. Any discussion? No. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Any against? That's carried. Thank you. And then we're on to the last item, the Chair's report, which, as you'll know, I wasn't really the Chair for the last while. But anyway, there's lots of stuff in the report. But I'll take it as read and happy to answer any questions if I can, or I'll defer to someone else. Yeah, Sam?
I'd just like to say thank you for, as Chair, picking up this role on the Regional Transport Committee. This is a really important committee for all of us, and our transport networks are key to the economic development and lifestyles that people choose to live right across Canterbury for, and for you to be the Chair and come and pick up this role, I think, speaks to the importance that you place here. You've chaired the meeting well today, and just want to acknowledge that. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. There was a bit of a tussle for it, just so you know. But no, we got there, so thank you. All good. Any other questions or comments? Cool. Have a mover for the resolutions. James and Sam, thank you. All those in favour, please say aye. Any against? That's carried. And I think we don't have to go into public excluded, so we don't have to worry about that. And then we'll go to our next meeting. Sorry, just got to get the right page here. So next meeting is 13th of February, and we'll close the meeting 5:46. Thank you, and I'll just do Karakia to finish our meeting. He Karakia tima whakamutinga o tātou nei hui. Kia tau nā manakitanga o nā me karo ki runga ki tēnā o tātou. Ko māhia te hua mā kihiki, kia toi te reo, kia toi te mana, kia toi te aroha, tūturu whakamoa, kia tīna, haumi e hui e, tā ki e. Kia ora koutou. Thank you.